Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning. On behalf of UNESCO Multisectoral Regional Office in Bangkok and the NEQMAP Secretariat, it is my honor to welcome you to this online sharing event, which will focus on this year's NEQMAP Topical Case Studies, which are under the theme of supporting schools and teachers' use of assessment to inform learning of all students. My name is Sumaya Mahmoud, and I am the focal point for the NEQMAP Secretariat. The Topical Case Study series are coordinated by two of our Network for Education Quality Monitoring in Asia Pacific, NEQMAP, members. They are coordinated by UNESCO Bangkok and the Global Education Monitoring Center. And each year, the series showcase promising practices and approaches from across our network. And we invite authors of such practices to share case studies of real impact. This year, we chose to focus on the use of assessment to inform teaching and learning. This topic is more than ever essential. It's an essential component for improving children and youth learning and supporting SDG 4, and in particular its target 4.1, or in ensuring that all learners achieve minimum proficiency in numeracy and literacy. In Asia Pacific, half of the countries still have at least 50% of the learner not attaining proficiency in mathematics and reading by the end of primary. It is thus more than urgent to support our teachers, our schools, to ensure that learners have the opportunity to effectively learn in our education system. But Asia Pacific is also home to many innovations, to many experiments and promising practices to support teachers and schools. Today, we will highlight 4 of these promising practices, and we will hear from case studies of true impact at the school and the teachers level. I would like to sincerely thank the authors of these case studies, from whom you will hear in a couple of minutes, for kindly accepting to share their experiences with our NEQMAP network and beyond. This is indeed what our network goal is, which is to foster peer learning and collaboration among experts, among educators, to advance the improvement of learning in the region. On this, I wish everyone a good webinar, and I give the floor to Ursula Schwentner, head of the GEM Center, for her welcoming remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sumaya, and hello and welcome everyone to this NEQMAP webinar on using assessment to support students' learning, also on behalf of the Global Education Monitoring Center, which is a partnership between the Australian Council for Educational Research and the Australian Government's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. The case studies that are presented today will be published in the next issue of the NEQMAP Topical Case Studies that showcase important initiatives in the Asia-Pacific region, as Sumaya has mentioned, about the depth and breadth of how evidence from learning assessments is used to inform and to improve educational policy and practice. And the topic of how learning assessments can be used to support student-centered and differentiated instruction is important to NEQMAP, with view to supporting the monitoring of learning, the progress of children in the region. And only when we ensure that teaching and learning are well targeted to students' learning levels, will they be able to develop to their potential and to thrive in their future careers and contribute successfully and meaningfully to society. So with that in mind, I would also like to thank the case study authors and presenters today. And I wish that the examples presented in our today's webinar will initiate further thinking and development of good practices to support every learner's progress. Thank you very much. I would now like to take you also through today's agenda. So Maya, can this be shown, please? All right, so as Sumaya has mentioned, we'll have 4 case studies all together. We'll start first with a case from Australia about using the progressive achievement test. Then we move on to a case from Pakistan about fostering learning through assessment. We'll have a short break for 15 minutes after the first 2 case studies, and then have 2 more case studies, one about India that focuses on teaching at the right level, and then another one on India that looks at teachers' perceptions on the adoption of standards-based assessment and the use of learning data in New Delhi. Following each of the case study or each of the sessions, we'll have a Q&A session as well, so to address any questions and comments that you have on the case studies as well. And yeah, that's the agenda for today. And I would now like to invite the first presenter to start. So Mark Crouch is from the Australian Council for Educational Research, and he will be talking about the progressive achievement test that's developed by ACER and how that has been used to develop data for informed schools. We will also have a discussant in this session. That's Raisha Utami from ACER in Indonesia, who will also tell us a little bit more about how the progressive achievement test has been adapted and is going to be used in the Indonesian context. Thank you very much, Mark. Please start.
Thank you both, Sumaya, and thank you, Ursula, as well. I'd like to thank everyone for being able to be invited to today as a presenter. Our topic today is using PAT to develop data-informed schools. I'd also like to acknowledge my colleagues, both Prue Anderson and Greta Rollo, who in collaboration, and 2 who are very knowledgeable educationalists, both in assessment and as practitioners in education. So thank you both, Prue and Greta. So to begin with, I'd like to just outline the school that I've been working with for some time. The school is Our Lady of the Visitation. They're located in Adelaide, South Australia, far distance from Thailand, Bangkok, but the world has become a very small place, so it's great to be able to actually share this with you today. Our Lady of the Visitation is a Catholic school. They are a primary school. There are students from preschool from 4 years of age up until around 11, 12 years of age in year 6. There's 360 students enrolled in the school, and I'll make a point about their enrolment towards the end of today's presentation. There is 22 teaching staff, and the school's socioeconomic status is at the lower end as a school in the Taparoo area in South Australia. There is an early years and primary, as mentioned. And I'd also like to mention the leaders. Leader of Learning, Tina Eder, who I've had a number of conversations and worked closely with over the years, as well as their inclusive educationist, Sandra Nasmith. And of course, you can see the principal there, Frank DeLulio, as well. A bit more about Our Lady of the Visitation, just to give you some context of our school, and that is the school is quite diverse and complex in a lot of ways. And we have students from different multicultural backgrounds as well. But part of the extracurricular in the school, as well as looking at the curriculum, they have a children's university, out of school sport, which is quite impactful in the school. SAP SASA, a district and state organisation of sporting events, their choir and instrumental music. And that last one there, their Enviro Club, one that focuses on the environment as part of the curriculum and part of the extra work that they do in the school as well. Bit of history too. I met this school back in 2016, so our relationship has been quite lengthy, and that building of collaboration and work over this period of time has been very reflective on their success as well. The school, when I did meet them, had PAT, and I'll talk a bit about what PAT is very soon, a progressive achievement approach as an assessment working in the school. They had it, but they had not yet used it. There was a change of leadership Frank DeLulio, as you can see them there back in 2016, had just come into the school as the new leader and new principal. He had come with previous experience using this form of assessment. So he currently had some knowledge and practice in that space within his previous school. And the school leadership attended a workshop at their state Catholic education unit where they first met me and approached me to say, what can we do in terms of building a relationship around the work that ACER do and the work that the school has done. They also had some learning intentions, so they had to build some foundations around where they wanted to go, what their targets were going to be. And this included the following, and that was they were going to have a whole school approach. It wasn't going to be just leadership. It wasn't just going to be the one person who looked after information, evidence, and data. It was going to be the whole staff. They were going to have some long-term objectives. Previously, the conversation I had with the principal and the leadership team was they would start things, they would maybe go over a month or 2 months or maybe a term. They wanted to actually have something that would target a longer period, and they would be able to see over many years what progress had been made by using PAT and using this assessment to inform teaching and learning. It was also to use and think about how PAT as an assessment was going to inform instruction, how evidence was going to support teachers in the classroom on a day-to-day basis across literacy and numeracy and other areas of the curriculum. It was going to focus also on using resources. PAT does come with a stream of teaching resources, the Teaching Resources Centre, that is targeted according to how students perform and attain a scale score in the assessment. And it was also about moving as the assessment changed. And currently, the assessment is adapted. Previously, they had done a static test, and I'll make a point of that in a second. They also needed a framework, and the framework was embedded in Catholic education, and you can see that there. And one of the main focuses was around developing thriving people, capable students, capable learners, leaders of the world, and the work around their religion, Catholic education. So these learning intentions were quite important to establish at the very start. What is PAT assessment? Well, PAT assessments are a tool of assessments which range from foundation years, students of around 5 years of age, right through to year 10, students of around 15, 16 years of age. It's a diagnosis of starting points. So it's about establishing where students are in their learning based upon what they know, what they don't know, and what they need to learn next. So it's also about monitoring that progress. So not as just a one-off test in the 1 year, but what does progress look like from year to year as students move through their learning from year to year in school. And it's also a flexible and secure assessment. It used to be completed on paper, it's now done online. And there's a number of assessments which schools have access to, including PAT 4th edition maths, which was a static test, which looked a lot like this, and through to adaptive testing. So as students would see a test, as you see here, of maybe 30, maybe up to 40 items, their adaptive test approach was building a personalised approach based upon the difficulty of the test. So students were getting a finer detail and richer information about how they performed in the test. And therefore, teachers had a better idea of those students' starting points. And to explain a bit more about PAT, we think about students. So think about students in a class, maybe in year 5. Students of the same age, of the same year level, will perform at different points in their learning. So when we talk about PAT, we talk about students attaining a scale score. And the scale score might be quite high or it might be quite low, but it's based upon students' capabilities. And when we think about students' capabilities and a number and a scale score, as you see here, we talk also about the ability to take that scale score and recognise it as a described scale. we can contextualize it into skills, knowledge, and understanding. So for Our Lady of Visitation, when they were testing their students, they would also certainly see that students of the same age and the same year level were performing at different points, different starting points. And they could compare that and read it into the described scale, the PAT Maths Reading Scale and the PAT Adaptive or Linear Testing. So ACER also talks about a progressive achievement approach. And this is one aspect that we talked a lot about in schools and, of course, with Our Lady of the Visitation. And that first point of collecting the evidence. What evidence is collected? In this case, it was using a tool to collect PAT Maths and PAT Reading. And that next step, which reflects on supporting next steps, taking the evidence and looking at targeting what next steps should be in terms of student strengths, their weaknesses, and their gaps. But it was not just looking at supporting strengths, weaknesses, and gaps and targeting teaching, but it was also supporting and developing teachers' capabilities, having them understand more about data literacies, terminology, what misconceptions they may have had about data literacies and assessment. But it was also about using resources. And that final step, that final stage was looking at tracking progress. Over time, what does progress look like? What does growth look like based upon the students' capabilities and based upon what evidence teachers took to look at those next steps in teaching and learning? I like this quote by the principal, Frank. Frank made mention, and he reflected on this in a number of times, but it is what you do with the data to improve outcomes is the key, not just doing the test. And I think that's really important when we think about collecting any evidence, collecting it in an assessment, collecting in a survey, or the observations that we see, or the conversations that we have with our colleagues, with our parents, and certainly with the students in our care. So using assessment as a motivator for change was one of the aspects that Our Lady of the Visitation really thought about. Data was there to help initiate that change. Developing teachers' professional development and learning, giving them more tools, giving them more skills to be able to use the evidence they collect short-term, long-term, daily, each term, each year, to be informed in their practice. They were going to have a focus. Trying to take on too much is not always the best way. So their focus was going to be maths, and I'll reflect on how they looked at maths as well. And that last point, they were going to use data to focus on developing students' goals, and they were developing students' SMART goals. And that was a critical part of building student efficacy and developing their idea of next steps in their own learning. So what did we do? The school talked and wanted to investigate how to analyse what they were looking at and then to interpret it. So we made some simple strategies, and one was detailing what we collected in terms of students' performance. And we just didn't do it in one year level. We looked at multiple year levels, and we looked at how students performed in each item, across each year level, across each strand. So in maths, it may have been looking at algebra, it could have been looking at number, could have been looking at measurement, statistics and probability. So each of these were taken into consideration when teachers all investigated the students' results. And this is important because it was the discussions that they made, the observations they made, but it also included them understanding how to generate the reports. They were learning something new, and this was an important part of that cycle of learning and professional capabilities, developing those professional capabilities. So once we did that, we also looked at defining what individual students were able to do. We took a deep dive into what teachers knew about the student and what they were seeing in terms of attaining a scale score. And again, they were looking at those starting points. What starting points? Because we knew that some of the students at year 5 may have been 1 or 2 years behind, and some of them may have been 1 or 2 years ahead. And they certainly started to look at what the strengths, weaknesses, and gaps were and began a discussion about what that was as well. What did they find? They interpreted the data to find particular weaknesses. They also found some gaps. So I'll refer to the weaknesses first, as you can clearly see there. And that was not just around the content and a proficiency in maths. It was around money and financial maths. And they found the discussions they had and the broader discussions from each year level, not just 1 year level, as a staff, having a better understanding of what next steps they needed to take. It was also around problem solving, that ability of students to read worded problems. So between these two, this created a starting point. I did mention a gap, and the gap was in geometry, and that was in the area of symmetry. So teachers across the school did look for those strengths. They certainly looked for the weaknesses, but they also looked for the gaps. What areas were not covered as well? Great conversations were occurring. So when teachers did look at students' attainment level, and they did look at the achievement band that they sat in, we also had to contextualize this. So those described achievement bands in maths and in money and financial maths gave teachers an understanding of typically how students performed in that test in reflection to a learning progressions of skills in maths. And as a result of looking at different starting points of students, they also recognised the conversations they needed to have around a differentiated approach to classroom practices. All of my students, remember, they all might be of the same age at the same year level, but when I'm teaching maths, when I'm teaching money, financial maths, what does that look like for students who may not be at that level of year 5? They still might be those 2 years behind. And how do I stretch the students who are far further along the way? So teachers had to look at students who have not yet mastered something, those who needed to consolidate their skills, and those who needed extension as well. So what did we find over years of collecting this data? And it was interesting to see that when the staff at the school had engaged in looking at professional learning and professional development in worded problems and problem solving, they also wanted to check how that looked over a year. So progress looks like this. From 2016, when we checked in on students who are in year 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 and 6, we could see through their scale score, and we can see diamond, square, and circle here, and these are real children, they've just been de-identified. We can see the progress that they've made over years of teaching and learning. So we can compare a student with the cohort, and we can also compare the student with the cohort and the norm. We're able to compare how students at Our Lady of the Visitation, how performed against their peers, but also against the rest of the students in Australia. Other students, for example, who are in year 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Note this one too. See this student at the bottom with the circle? We can see him performing below that box and whisker of other students and of the group, but what we're seeing about this student is really important. The progress the student has made. And this is important when we give feedback to our students, and also when we give feedback to parents as well, when we report to them, but also when we're passing on this information to the next teacher in the following year. So the school certainly had challenging questions. And this is the important thing about looking at data, looking at evidence with teachers in the same year and across the school. We need to ask those critical questions. These were some of those that they did ask. Which areas of the curriculum are students having trouble accessing? Which areas of the curriculum do we need to ensure we cover those gaps? What assessments do we have, and how can we broaden their use to include formative, summative, and diagnostic? So teachers were thinking more broadly about how they gathered their evidence, right down to formative tasks, summative tasks, but also triangulating all of that information into discussion and into observations of our students. And that last one, do we really know what differentiation is about? So is it just a catchphrase? So we use a lot of terminology in education, but there are areas that some teachers needed to go back over and relearn. Sometimes we call it unlearning, but in this case, it was about developing a better understanding of differentiation. So as a result of those conversations and a result of working in problem solving, working with maths, working across the school, there was an impact. They came up with these things that needed to be recognised. Explicit teaching, identifying the needs of our students, those students at different entry points. The learning progressions are made very visible. What does it look like in a classroom for a student who is 1-2 years behind, for those students who are ahead? It's important to understand that their capabilities need to be addressed. So knowing where our students are in their learning. It was also having that whole school focus. And this last one I like is celebrating students' learning at a community to celebrate success. We need to recognise, not just with our students, but with our whole community, what that success looks like. So some of those successes and challenges extended out, developing specific activities to support students who were struggling. Identify the range of students in our class and recognising that our students are not all working at that same entry point, at that same year level. Supporting student learning goals and developing an understanding of online and accessible assessment. Previously done on paper, we had to learn something new. And using PAT scales to identify learning needs and terminology. I'd like you to listen to the next two teachers and just a brief understanding of how they've seen PAT support them.
The PAT report has given us the opportunity to compare children's progress over time, and it has also provided us tools to support children and strategies in teaching particular concepts.
And it also highlights for us the way that the questions are set out, helps us understand some of their thinking, particularly if they have got incorrect answer but got some of the thinking happening for them.
I like that last point about reading the topics, understanding what they read, especially when they're doing a test that may be multiple choice. So it's important that through that, we had teacher collaboration, staff collaboration, working together in PLCs, professional learning communities, to discuss further, as you heard from the previous two teachers, about what they needed to address or understand. And staff using evidence to make better judgments about student starting points. This was a critical area as well. Staff using data more effectively to inform their teaching and learning. How was the information telling them everything that they collected in terms of data in maths, for example, to make informed decisions? So it's important for staff to collaborate, come back and keep discussing. Part of this case study also looked at recognising a framework of a cycle of inquiry, and I'll make reference to Helen Timpley and Parr. And in this, there is those 5 particular areas of the cycle. The first one is, what knowledge and skills do our students need? How do we find this? And we did this by collecting this specific data. And in doing so, we found these weaknesses and gaps, which I'd already mentioned. So using a tool, it was collecting data to find out those starting points of our students. But as a result, that next point, what knowledge and skills do we as teachers need? We continually learn. And after nearly 40 years of being in education, I don't spend one day where I don't learn something new each time I engage in something. So for these teachers, it was about understanding, how do we actually do find weaknesses of students and the gaps, and in this specific area in maths. It was also having teachers learning how to interpret, to make informed decisions about the data they collected. It was building an understanding, again, of data literacies, building an understanding, interpreting the work that they're collecting based upon students' attainment in scale scores and in the assessment. So Teachers then had to think about deepened professional knowledge and refining those skills. So what we did and undertook over a year is I worked with the staff around problem solving and worded problem. And it was also about researching new entry points in the classroom for supporting students. So with that also came engaging students in new learning experiences. And that could have been anything from developing the literacies in maths. So starting a new lesson in money and financial maths may have not necessarily been just going straight into looking at how to add, take away, look at decimals and percentages, but it may have been looking at the words, new words that students would have come across in worded problems in financial maths and money. And there's a point here I'd like to make. Students will be at different stages in their learning. An old colleague of mine, Jim Spittle, once told me, most problems are not solved quickly. Sometimes we need to provide students with a little bit more time. And we often then look at the impact. If we're going to look at different things that we do and change, how do we look at what impact has been made? And if we think about it, we look at the tool that we used at the start and we address the tool at the end. What progress has been made over that period of time, and continually asking questions of our colleagues about what change they saw. We also celebrate progress and achievement. I think this is really critical. We celebrate those successes, we showcase student learning progressions, and we share this in parent community. And I remember going to 2 assemblies at the school where they showcased the work that they had done both in money and financial maths and those other areas. Where is the school now? Just quickly, they've come a long way. So they communicate to parents, leaders, students that is data informed. It's being used more systematically. They've established a process of using PAT data analysis. Professional learning development is reflective of students' needs and goals, and there's consistent practices across the school. Still learning? Yes, they are. And the last staff meeting that I attended with them, I was able to see how they've come in terms of transitioning from linear testing, for example, to adaptive testing. And what's been the impact across the school and education sector? Their ability as a school to trial and initiate positive changes. And as a result of that, supporting and informing other schools in Catholic education in their sector and their colleagues of the progress and the strategies that they have made. Modelling best practice, interpreting and analysing the data they use to be effective and to be data informed. And supporting change to broader policies and practices which they had a huge impact on when talking about moving not just their school, but the sector they worked in terms of linear to adaptive testing. And to finish off, I'd like you to hear from an early years teacher. And this is really important because her thinking about learning just doesn't stop as we are
We
educators.
scaffold our children, I think, a lot in R1. We really give them a lot of explicit teaching and repetitive instructions, and that really supports them in a classroom setting. But in an online assessment, that scaffolding, it's not directly there. So perhaps for us, it's about looking ahead and trying to get our children to become more independent. We scaffold our...
On that note, I've probably gone over time. Sorry, Ursula, I tried to keep it to 15 minutes. I'd like to congratulate Our Lady of the Visitation and for inviting me into their school. And thank you both, Ursula, Sumaya, NEQMAP and UNESCO.
Thank you very much, Mark, for this excellent presentation. And it really shows how PET is a powerful tool that can help teachers to better understand what they already know and observe in their students by combining this with an actual scale score to see what are their, achievements on the tests and where are their weaknesses and strengths. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
There have been a few questions there. I think they've been responded for now. So I would like to move on to our brief presentation for Raisha from ACER Indonesia to show how PET has been adapted to the Indonesian context. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Ursula. Maybe share screen. Okay, so thank you, Ursula and Mark, for giving us the ACER Indonesia and PATH Indonesia team to share the use of PATH Maths Indonesia in Indonesian context. So before we briefly go into the why that we choose to adapt PATH into Indonesian context and how it has been since the initial development, I would like to share a bit of a short clip. It's an interview with math teachers in Indonesia, where they share their concerns and their needs in improving their students' learning and how it can facilitate them teaching. So I will share here. Oh, wait a minute, sorry. I think I need to share the sound. Okay.
Buat saya hal yang paling spesifik yang dibutuhkan sebagai guru adalah kemampuan memfasilitasi, karena kita sering juga terpaku pada soal-soal ujian yang jatuhnya bukan memfasilitasi tapi hanya menginstruksi, lakukan ini, kerjakan ini, hitung ini, padahal kita sejatinya memfasilitasi. Kita perlu kemampuan untuk mencermati apa yang mereka butuhkan supaya kemampuan berpikirnya berkembang.
Alright, so that's a little bit of a short clip of math teacher shared their concern, and that's actually where we base our decision on in adapting PATH progressive achievement approach in PATH Maths Indonesia. So a little bit of background of what's going on in Indonesian education, that actually there has been a change in the paradigm of assessment and education focus. National assessment, we used to have standardized, high-stake national assessment tested to students at the end of their academic year, the highest level, which is on the 12th grade of secondary school. But now it's been changed into more a sampling kind of approach, and it is in a education unit and district level analysis. And then government of Indonesia, the Ministry of Education, also have concerns on improving literacy and numeracy skills, and it has been the focus for the current government as well. And then on a more practical motivation from the teachers, the teachers have shared with us, they shared that math has been most feared subject, I think, in Indonesia, because the paradigm has been the teachers teach math to tasks, for them to pass the test, and not exactly for learning. And with the shift of the focus from the ministry and from the government, teachers are more aware that they need to improve their numeracy and mathematical skills. But in doing so, they need tools to actually allow them to diagnose where the students at in their learning journey, particularly in math subject, and then diagnose what their strengths and weaknesses are, particularly in strengths, like what Mark have shared earlier, like there are some 6 strengths in math, and then how to monitor their progress over time. So that's where actually the progressive achievement approach comes in, and we decide to, adapt and particularly the PATH Maths. Like Mark also mentioned that there have been adaptive and static. In the context of Indonesia, we have just adapted the static, the linear PATH Maths Indonesia. And actually this is to supplement the current policy to provide a formative assessment where we can diagnose students' needs in terms of their learning with the student level analysis. And with the data provided by PATH in their reporting system, it can actually improve inform teacher to improve their next steps of learning, and then help teachers prepare for targeted teaching, where actually it's also another concern from a government of Indonesia, which is to do the differentiated learning. So what have we done from the initial development? So we started in 2018, where we did the alignment to the local context, adaptation, translation, review. And then in 2019 to 2022, during the pandemic, it's been slow, but we've managed to do the field trialing in Jakarta. And we have also had some collaboration with the local government in Kudus, where we did the soft launching in 5 schools, from grade 3 primary to grade 10 secondary schools. And then last April, we did the official launching of PATH Indonesia. It's been available for schools to use. So in terms of Indonesian case, how does PATH Math actually address the needs of educators or math teachers? So this is taken from their the interview with the local government, the schools, the teachers, and the principals that we did the soft launching. After we shared the report, they share to us like how PATH actually have helped them, and it's just ties in with the how PATH is presenting their data, which is the reporting system. Like for example, in here, through the scales like Mark has presented earlier, the schools have the overall picture actually to see where their students at in the same scales, regardless of their year, regardless of their levels, from year 3, 4, 5 to 6, like they're on the same scale. And then so the schools can actually see where the students at, for example, in year 3, in year 4 and such. And then this can also help inform teachers and also schools, like through band descriptions, what could be the next steps that they should do to help students to move to the next level. And then the other features of PATH that really help the teachers, the math teachers and the schools that we did the soft launching, they said that the presentation of data in here in the group report through the strands, they really know the trends. Like for example, in one cohort, for example, in here in 6th grade, where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, and then through that, the teachers can delve deeper actually to see which concepts in math that the students might not have mastered, why they actually have that difficulty, and then target their teaching to the next, to the next steps. And then on the right side, the report is the individual report. Now this is also can help the teachers to do the differentiated learning, like maybe some students, on the lower band, and they can know the performance of the students even in the individual level, like which strengths that the individual students actually need to help, to be supported by their teachers. So so far, the local government wants to use this data to do for the teachers' professional development, again, to address the target teaching at the right level, differentiated learning, and ultimately it's to help improving Indonesian students' literacy and numeracy skills. The next steps for PATH Indonesia team is we will continue to help schools improving learning, and our plan is actually help schools through professional development on how to use assessment data to help students improving their learning, because teachers admit that this is new to them, using data, evidence-based teaching to help students learning. It's something that they need to learn. So professional development is something that they really need. And then, of course, how to use the data to inform teaching, and then help schools as well. And after the data, they get the data in directing their efforts to help students and also their teacher and their staff. I think that would be it actually from Indonesian case. Thank you so much, Ursula, for having us. And also thank you, Mark, for giving us the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raisha, for this presentation to showing us how PET has been adapted to the Indonesian context and what the next steps are in its implementation. There has been a really interesting question or comment in the chat before about strategies that can really help to use the data that's collected with these assessments to, you know, better differentiate teaching and learning. But I would like to keep this question until after the next presentation for the broader discussion, but just to maybe think about this a little bit in the meantime as well. Thank you. Thank you, Raisha. I would now like to invite the presenters from our second case study for this session. So that's Dr. Shizad Jiva, who is the CEO from the Aga Khan University Examination Board, and Ali Bijani, Manager and Teacher Support at Aga Khan University Examination Board as well. So if you could please present on your case study about fostering learning through assessment and how teachers and students are supported by your assessment as well. Thank you. And sorry, Munira Mohammed from the Aga Khan University Examination Board will be presenting as well, as I can see here. Welcome.
Thank you. I hope you can see. Thank you so much, Sumaya and Ursula. I hope I am audible to everyone and the screen is visible.
Yes, you are. We can hear you well and see the screen as well. Thank you.
So thank you so much. Before I start, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, because we are located in multiple areas today. I would like to initially take this opportunity to extend our heartiest gratitude to Sumaya and Ursula for the complete guidance and the support, and specifically to NEQMAP for organizing this wonderful webinar on such an important topic itself. So we are from Pakistan and thrilled to present our work on fostering learning through assessment. Pakistan is a beautiful country with varieties of landforms such as mountains, rivers, deserts, plateaus, lakes, etc. The country consists of 231.4 million of population, of which 1/3 is youth. Being the third world country, our country faces many challenges, and one of it is in the education sector. Let me give you an overview of the education system of Pakistan. The system is categorized as pre-primary, primary, middle, secondary, higher secondary, and tertiary levels. There are major challenges in education in Pakistan, both in terms of access and quality. Around 20 million children are out of school. In Pakistan, the school dropout rate is also very high. Some of the reason for high dropout is due to lack of schools, teachers, poor facilities, poor assessment practices, and poor learning outcomes. This has resulted in the rise of rote memorization and teaching to the test culture, which has jeopardized the learning taking place in the classroom. Currently, there are 32 examination boards in Pakistan, and we are from Aga Khan University Examination Board, which was established through the ordinance of the government of Pakistan as the first private university examination board. As an awarding body, we are also given mandate to work in the development and implementation of K-12 system. This is to ensure and introduce a fair and transparent system of assessment, promote conceptual learning, bring in quality assessment, which can in turn improve classroom teaching and learning, because we very deeply believe that assessment is the tool that drives learning. AKU-EB at high-stake examinations offer 2 qualifications: secondary school certificate, SSC, higher secondary school certificate, HSSC. As per the government policy, for each qualification, there are 2 levels, 1 and 2, and the students can enroll in different groups. That is, for SSC, they can enroll in science group and humanities group, And for HSSC, they have 5 groups, namely pre-medical, pre-engineering, science general, commerce, and humanities. For each group at the SSC level, it is mandatory to appear for 8 subjects at each level, of which 5 are compulsory and 3 are electives. However, for HSSC, it is mandatory to appear in 7 subjects, of which 4 are compulsory and 3 are electives. There are multiple test tools that is used for assessing, which includes MCQs, multiple choice questions, CRQs, ERQs, constructive response questions, extended response questions. And we also conduct practicals or performance-based assessments for science and other skill-based subjects. The given slide is a snapshot of data processes that are performed to gather information for result announcement, as well as for the completion of the feedback loop in the form of individualized school performance report. The data is generated through the administration of high-stakes examination for each level. The data is captured through OMR scanning and screen marking of constructive response and extended response questions. This data is then analyzed through 22 psychometric indicators, which are based on classical test theory, CTT, and item response theory, IRT. IRT is used for decision-making only, whereas CTT is used for decision-making as well as for reporting purposes. The analysis process, along with moderation of scores, involve affiliated school teachers, internal subject experts, and psychometricians. Once the data is compiled and finalized, the results are announced and disseminated to the candidates. In addition, a comprehensive customized report is sent to each affiliated school on their performance in that particular examination in comparison to all other affiliated schools in Pakistan. The purpose of the school performance report is to initiate a process of data-driven decision-making, reflective practices towards pedagogy, assessment, and leadership, enabling schools to set target and goals and to plan capacity development as well. In addition to it, it is to ensure transparency of the examination board and to strengthen trust between our system and key stakeholders. Before I delve into the features of the school performance report, let me show you the information that is shared with the student along with the grading system used. Here, I would like to share that from this year onwards, we have moved from a 7-point grading system to a 10-point grading scale. This was relentlessly pursued by Dr. Jiva and was ratified by the government in December 2022. So now let me highlight the kind of information that the school's performance report provides to the school itself. An overview of the performance of a school in a particular level, which is SSC, that is Secondary School Certificate, Part 1 or Level 1, over the period of 3 years in the form of grades. Then the SPR also shows an overview of the performance of the students at each level of the certificate in comparison with other schools with respect to the grades achieved. If a school has multiple groups that I had mentioned initially, such as science, humanities, or for HSSC, 5 multiple groups, this table also is shown to highlight the difference performance in terms of group as well. Further to this, the SPR informs school about the performance of students in subjects in comparison with other schools in Pakistan in the form of average marks obtained. Then the SPR, the school performance report, further deep dive and informs about the performance of students in each subject, item-wise in comparison with other schools for MCQs or multiple choice questions. The information shared includes the student learning outcome for a particular item, These numbers are aligned with the syllabus, which has already been shared with the stakeholders, along with its cognitive level, that is knowledge, understanding, or application and beyond. This is followed by data showing the performance of an item of the particular school in comparison with all other schools. Now, what the school can use or look at while looking at this. So in comparison, if your school is doing at par with the national performance, you can be happy about it. You can relax that yes, your school is performing at par. If your school is performing better than the national average, a pat on the back, and you can continue doing the same strategy, using the same pedagogy and move on. However, if your school is performing at a particular concept, not at par with the national level, that is where you need to reflect upon your teaching learning methodology and improve upon it. Over here as well, you can see that the items which have been deleted from the item analysis during the result making process is marked as U and reported back to the schools as well. And same is the case if there are any double Q reported during the analysis. In the similar way, the performance of students in each subject item-wise in comparison with other schools for constructive response questions and extended response question is also shown. This helps teachers to go through the analysis and comparison and make the decisions. Now the e-marking notes. This is another component which goes along in the school performance report. These illustrate examples of responses of CRQs and ERQs against a structured marking scheme. These notes provide qualitative analysis for each question by the subject expert in the form of constructive feedback to the school. For the case study, we have selected 3 schools, keeping in mind the demographics and the year of affiliation with the examination board. The data for the case study was gathered using in-depth interviews with the school leadership, as well as a survey form by the teachers for gathering data on the utilization of SPR. So the findings of the case study reflected that the SPR is used in the following way when it reaches the school. It is used by the school leadership to understand the overall performance as well as the subject-wise performance for strategic level decisions. In addition, the teachers are more keen towards the item-wise performance and the e-marking notes, which help them in planning of their teaching and learning. Throughout this process, there has been a strong support system provided by the examination board in the understanding and utilization of school performance report through on-site training and multiple webinars. Here are some of the testimonials of the school leadership regarding SPR usage and its impact. So they have mentioned that it helps them make decisions in the respective areas, identify areas where they require improvement and devise strategies accordingly. Moreover, while SPR is a very important tool for schools affiliated from our examination board, we also use the information in the school performance report for need-based capacity building plans for regions as well as for school-specific plans. The purpose is to help the stakeholders understand the expectations of the board for the high-stakes examination and improve the overall teaching and learning happening in their classrooms. From the case study, we have concluded some of the impacts of SPR on the teaching, learning, and assessment, which includes clarity on expectations of student learning outcomes, pedagogical suggestions, examples of responses leading towards reflective approach on current practices, assessment practices for improved teaching and learning in the classroom. These will be further detailed in the case study write-up as well. So this was all from our side. Thank you so much. And once again, thank you, NEQMAP, for all the support and help. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Munira, for this great presentation about the school performance report developed by the Aga Khan University Examinations Board, and for really showing how the report provides the evidence to the schools that they can then use to set targets, achieve goals, and also use this evidence to reflect on the current practices and to make improvements as well. So thank you very much. I would now like to open the floor to our participants. Please put any questions and comments that you have in the Q&A section. There is currently no post in there. So I would like to invite our panelists to reflect a little bit more on what's been asked before. What really are the strategies that teachers then can use with this evidence to better target their students and differentiate learning and instruction in the classroom? When you think of a classroom that might have more than 20 or up to 40 or even more students, how do you then, differentiate and target each student individually? So I would like to invite our three panelists to talk to that a little bit. Thank you. Munira, for example, Shazad would like to say something. Yes, please respond.
Yeah, my apologies. So basically, when it comes to the high stakes examinations, the reporting of the scores of the students is not compared with other students. So we don't show that. However, what we do is basically, we also provide facilities of online teaching learning assessment, which is more focused on further enhancing the formative assessment strategies and approach in the classrooms. And that does provide, that is basically on school-based assessment. It has nothing to do with high stakes examinations. So in that regards, we started that in 2020, 2021. And so far, we don't have many schools taking this approach yet. Because of the COVID, there was a lot of financial setbacks for many schools in the country. So we are hoping with time, things will improve and more schools are going to use that online approach to further enhance their formative assessment approach in the classrooms. But whatever the teachers are learning, because the entire approach of the school feedback report is very much teacher-centered. And our objective is to make sure that teachers are learning from the data, the insights that they're getting about their particular area of subjects, any particular topics that they see that their students are struggling. So for the upcoming cohort, which is a new cohort, they can further improve. Ali, who's with us, he provides a lot of support to the schools, his department, and they provide a region-based support to the schools. Sometimes schools would require a need-based approach. One of the schools I would like to mention, the Korangi Academy, one of the principals who shared her feedback as well. This particular school is in the fishing village of the very outskirts of the city, where the people coming from are from low socioeconomic backgrounds. This particular school was really struggling in the earlier years, and they then decided, they worked with us, and we provided all the support they needed to understand what standards are all about and how to achieve those standards. And this school has now been one of the top schools performing across the country. So you see the impact in the classroom, and in a way, it's much better rather than comparing student to student. item-wise. It is more about a wider learning, improving teaching in the classrooms. If any of my colleagues would like to add, please feel free to do so.
Thank you very much, Shizad. Would Ali like to add something here, please?
Yeah, thank you. It's a very pertinent question, but as Munira mentioned in the presentation, that if the average mean score of an item is low at the school end, the school needs to worry. But out of 40 items, if 1 or 2 items are low at national norms, that means that's the need of most of the students. So that's the idea of reflecting when we prepare need analysis-based training, that what are the items which are performing low at regional and national level, and mention that they take much interest and the improvements come in that same direction.
Thank you very much, Ali. That's really interesting to hear. I would also like to come back to one point that's been mentioned before. And so Shazid and Ali and Munira, you also related to the importance of the information that's provided to teachers so that they can target their teaching and learning. But I would like to come back to something that, Mark, you mentioned, that was about enabling the students to better understand their own learning process as well, and to be able to use the feedback that they gain from the assessment to help themselves to progress and move forward. So maybe if you could say a little bit more about strategies, Mark, about how that can be achieved. Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose there's different levels of how we look at that. I'm a big fan of Lynn Sharrett and the work that she does around putting faces on data, as well as the work she's done in Clarity. So if you're aware of that, this is one area that the school and Catholic Ed have picked up on. And it's referring to Bump It Up. And we have students actually looking at, not teachers just looking at targeting their teaching, but students targeting their learning. So looking at and understanding where they are based upon their capabilities and what skills that they need to develop, but also making that very visual to them as well. And this could be in the classroom where it's seen on the wall about the kind of work that they're doing, but kinds of next steps that they actually need. And this includes identifying their strengths, which are purely there, but we also know this about students when they're doing a multiple choice test. And we get very wary of this, is that some students just have greater skills in one area than another. And that could be by experience that they come with from their parents, from their background, and what they've done in the past. And this actually reflects in the classroom. So some students may be very well versed in some areas of the curriculum, and they may be struggling in others. And even within maths, for example, they might be struggling in worded problems and problem solving, but they're very good in fluency. They can take a process of addition and multiplication and work it out very well, but as soon as they put it to worded problems or problem solving, they struggle. So it's important as we talk about bumping it up or having students make their own work visible. It's also having students be able to explain that to their parents and inform teachers as well, having them build confidence around their understanding of a concept, a skill or knowledge, and being able to actually relate that back to their teacher and also share it with their parents in a confidently as well. I hope that helps our thinking and some of the work that we've actually done with students in schools, Ursula.
Thanks a lot, Mark, for your response. Would anyone else from our presenters like to comment on the topic of how to, strengthen students' ability to improve their learning and to manage their learning process? I don't see any more hands up. Please go ahead, say. Yeah, thank you.
So probably what could be done is, as I mentioned earlier about our online approach for teaching, learning, and improving formative assessment. Those areas can be very useful and helpful for students to improve assessment. We are trying right now, we haven't reached to that target yet, to introduce computer adaptive assessment or testing, where it can help students to understand and learn, and the system can take them back to certain concepts. So it's more like a progression approach. So that is one thing that we are planning currently, and hopefully soon we will start developing that. But I think if we are able to achieve that, it will really help students to become more independent learner, and have more confidence in their concepts and topics that they're supposed to learn as per the curriculum set by the country. Munira, you want to add something?
Just one more dimension to it as well. So it's not only the computer adaptive testing, we are also looking forward if we are able to provide a more comprehensive feedback to the student in terms of their performance against different cognitive levels. Because an overall score or a certain item performance, if we are able to provide the feedback to the student based on their cognitive performance against each subject, that would also be a good feedback for the student to then go back to it and improve. Because there are certain students who work really very well when it comes to application and beyond questions. Some students struggle with the knowledge part. Some are very strong in those components, but struggles when it comes to application side. So this way, the student can even target their direction towards for the next upcoming examinations or upcoming processes, that how they can go forward about it.
Having said that, I think it's important to note here that, again, these information would be personalized for that particular individual and not a comparison with other students, because it can become quite demotivating, because parents are very competitive as well. And they would like to see how their child is performing against other child, which I think is unfair for the student. It's all about reporting the student what they know and how much they have learned, rather than comparing them with another students from that particular school or any other schools in the country.
Thank you, Shehzad. That's really a very important point, to really focus on each individual student's learning progress and giving them their opportunity to improve and get better in their learning. We are now going into a short break for 10 minutes. Since we're all in different time zones, please be back in 10 minutes sharp, and we will continue with the second session of the webinar. Thanks again, all the presenters in this first session, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again for the second half. Thank you very much.
We start back at 2 p.m. sharp, Bangkok time. Welcome back, everyone. So we are now starting the second half of our event, presenting the 4 topical case studies for this year's NEQMAP Topical Case Studies series, which focuses on the use of assessment to inform teaching and learning in classrooms and in schools. We will now focus on 2 topical case studies from the same country, from India, but focusing on different approaches and also different states in India. So first of all, I would like to give the floor to Gervin Kaur, who's a program manager at Pratham Education Foundation, to tell us more about teaching at the right level, and in particular, the use of teaching at the right level in some states in India. Gervin, thank you for being with us, and the floor is yours. Okay, Gervin, can you hear me?
Hello, I'm audible?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Okay, great. I will quickly start with my presentation. Give me a second. Share my screen. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gurveen. I am from Pratham Education Foundation. I oversee Pratham's government partnership work across 15 states in the country. Pratham started in 1995 in the urban slums of Bombay. And since then, we've grown in both scale and scope across the country. Pratham facilitates India's nationwide well-known annual status of education report in every rural district of the country. And for the past 2 decades or more, we've developed high-impact, low-cost interventions that help children acquire foundational skills. And I would say every year we reach almost 5 million children every year. Now, coming to the problem. Since 1995, we've been working very closely with the children. And over these last 3 decades, India has made great achievements in increasing the enrollment of children. However, the problem that we face in the country is that still in 2023, as of ACER 2022, more than 50% children in India are still not able to read a very simple standard 2 level text in their own local language. And the problem looks different. I mean, in the table here, you could see ACER 2018 data. Only 27% children in standard 3 are able to read a simple grade 2 level text. And in grade 5, only 50% children can read a grade 2 level text. Now the problem arises with the teacher. Who should she teach when half the class is not able to read a very simple text, and in grade 3, when it's 1/3 of the class, only 1/3 of the class is able to read a simple standard 2 level text. Who should the teacher teach, and what should she teach whom? And over the years, Pratham, in collaboration with JPAL, has tried different models, has made various experiments in understanding how we can make quick changes in children's learning levels through very simple, low-cost, scalable models. And in collaboration with JPAL and by conducting various randomized controlled trials, we've come up with teaching at the right level. Now, what is teaching at the right level? Let me give you a quick glimpse into what it is. We start with a simple one-on-one assessment, which is done to group children by level instead of by grade or instruction. It's a very simple oral assessment that's conducted by a teacher directly with the child, and where the teacher tries to understand where the child's current learning level is. It is very helpful for the teacher to understand, because a lot of times what we have seen on the ground is that although teachers do have a fair understanding of the classroom, but they're still not able to identify which children are at what level. So there's a very simple assessment that's done with the child. Here on the, you would see a picture of how the simple assessment tool looks like. On the left side, there is a story, a simple story that they read. On the right is a para, then there's letters and the word. So they start with reading a para. If they're able to read a para, then the teacher makes them read a story. But if they're not able to read a para, then the teacher would ask them to either read the word or read the letter to identify what the learning level is. After conducting the assessment, the teachers would group the children according to the learning levels. For each group, there are a set of activities and materials in reading and arithmetic. So there are some big group activities, there are some small group activities. The idea is the teacher stays engaged with the class in totality, and also with the class wherein activities are conducted according to the learning levels. Now, children, they would do activities in big groups and small groups. And as and when there is a midline assessment, I mean, after conducting the first assessment, there is a midline assessment conducted after a considerable, I mean, it can be say 20 or 30 days, wherein the teacher tries to understand the level again, and then the groups are reshuffled. For example, a child has moved from say word level to para level or story level. The teacher would then make the child move from the word to the story level, and level-wise activities would be conducted with the child. And then after again, say 20 to 30 days, a similar endline assessment, the same assessment is conducted with the child again to understand if they've progressed in the last 40-50 days. Now, how does TAL look different from a typical school? In a typical school, children are organized by their age, by their grade. One teacher teaches the entire grade, and one teacher, she has 40 children, where every child could be, I mean, children are of different learning levels. But in reality, the teacher actually struggles with who does she teach what, because they're all at different learning levels. Whereas in a TAL classroom, children are organized by the current learning level. After she's found out their learning levels, she organizes them into groups according to the learning levels, and she teaches one or two groups, and she has 40 children, but they are bifurcated according to the learning levels. And she would give them instruction, or she would give them activities which are appropriate for their own level, so that they can progress from this to the next level. Now, multiple RCTs or we've had multiple impact evaluations and multiple randomized control trials show that TAL works in different ecosystems. It works with different agents. So for example, studies have shown that even if a school teacher conducts teaching right level, or a volunteer conducts teaching right level, or some paid instructor conducts, it has shown improvement in all of these scenarios. And all of them, they conducted TAL in school, in community spaces, during school hours, after school hours, in intensive camps, daily. So they were all conducting different models, but it showed that it was an effective medium, it was an effective approach to change children's learning levels in a very, very short duration of time. Has TAL been adapted across the world? Yes. TAL is a very adaptable approach, and it has been contextualized for different countries through partners, through TAL Africa. TAL is now being conducted in Africa, Latin America, and in other parts of Asia. Now coming to my case study in TAL in Andhra Pradesh, India. In 2022, the government of Andhra Pradesh, they conducted a statewide assessment of children to understand what the learning outcomes of children were. And after the assessment, they were not very happy with the results. more than 50% children, they were not able to read a simple grade 2 level text. And this assessment was actually conducted with grades 1 to 9. And after the assessment and the results came out, they happened to meet with Esther Duflo, who then offered teaching at the right level as a solution to the state, which then brought Pratham into the picture. And we started with this TAL intervention in Andhra Pradesh. The scale was huge, the challenge was big. It was more than 1 million children in 32,000 schools across 26 cities in Andhra Pradesh. So now then we started working with the government on making the content. The language is Telugu. It's Telugu spoken in Andhra Pradesh. We started working with the government on content, on training, and on giving the monitoring support, wherein the government brought in the resources. They made sure that it was implemented to the teachers, and there was proper monitoring to ensure that the program was implemented well. I wanted to just stop here and show the results of the intervention. Now you would see at the baseline, 11% children of between standard 3 to 5, they were at beginner level. This number in a period of 100 days came down to 3%. At the beginning of this 100-day intervention, 18% children only could read a story level text. However, after 100 days, this number increased to 39%. So, and in all, we saw 26 percentage point improvement in the ability of children to read at least a para-level text and 21% to read a story-level text. And this was all done in a duration of 100 days, wherein a teacher conducted a teaching at the right level class for 2 hours every day. And after those 2 hours, they followed the regular curriculum. Now coming to math, there was a 19 percentage point improvement in children who were able to read a 3-digit number from baseline to endline. And there was 24 percentage point increase in children who could do simple division from baseline to endline. So how did Pratham, now coming to how did Pratham actually reach 1 million children in a period of 100 days, and how were we actually able to conduct TAL with more than 1 million children? So what we focused on was to create a cadre of leaders of practice, a cadre from the government, which will lead the program, which will oversee key processes, they will monitor, and they will basically be the ones who will be taking the ownership of the program. These leaders of practice, they were trained on TAL approach, and Pratham insisted that we train them on TAL approach, and they were actually in turn asked to conduct practice classes. The idea was that these selected cadre, which was actually 100 people in Andhra Pradesh, these 100 people, they were trained directly by Pratham, and these 100 people conducted a TAL class for at least 15 days so that they themselves have a hands-on understanding on the nuances of TAL, how it actually works for the children, what challenges teachers could face, and how the system could identify solutions for these problems themselves. The material after these, just to talk about the trainings here, after these trainings were conducted of the leaders of practice who we call into the system, these leaders of practice then trained another cadre, and then another cadre finally trained the teacher. So this was a cascade model of training, and whoever trained was asked to conduct at least a 15 days practice classes themselves for them to have a good understanding of how the approach works and if it works. After that, after the trainings were done, government printed the material. It was a very simple 500 rupees material that was offered to every class, which is what, close to $10. $10 material was given in every class to support a TAL intervention. So therefore, it was basically very low cost, and it was contextualized for the state, for the language that the children knew in. And the intervention was conducted then by the teachers themselves for a period of 100 days. Now you would ask that, the data was huge. It was, we had to collect the data of 1 million children across the state, and it was not an easy task. So how we did that was, we have an in-house GP app We use that app for the teacher to enter the aggregated data. So the teacher does not have to enter the data of every child. They aggregate the data of the entire class, and that aggregated data was actually entered into the app directly by the teacher, which was then, the data was then used by the entire system to make decisions. So for example, after the baseline assessment was conducted, the people at the block level, at the district level, they knew that, which clusters in the city or which blocks needed more focus upon by the district officials. They were provided a dashboard to see real-time assessment data, to see real-time monitoring data, to ensure that whichever schools, whichever teachers needed more support, whichever schools, the aggregated data showed that there was more need of supervision or, just mentoring and monitoring. They had access to that data and they took decisions on monitoring or, just which areas should the district officials or the state officials be focusing upon. And after these, after every round of assessment, review meetings were conducted by the state level, by the district level, and the officials and the block level officials for everyone to discuss about what the data is, how the data is actually, and the idea was that how whatever data, whatever real-time data everyone had was linked to decision-making at every level. And the intervention was monitored. It was led by leaders of practice from the government. Regular review meetings, as I said, were conducted at block level, district level, and state level. What our key learnings of the intervention was that TAL was effective in improving the learning levels of children. We saw 26 percentage point improvement in a matter of 100 days. Even though this cohort of children had missed 2 years of schooling, this was the year when they just come back from COVID break, which lasted for at least 2 years in India. Because we were able to have a dedicated team at the district level, at the sub-district level, there was proper monitoring, mentoring, and which enabled smooth communication. The government had made smooth communication channels, be through WhatsApp groups or whatever the mediums were, to ensure that the program happened smoothly in those 100 days. There was continuous review of assessment data, of monitoring data, which made sure that the data was reviewed in all review meetings. It was used in decision-making and wasn't just collected for the sake of it. The data collection methods were lean and everyone had real-time access to data, which helped them take decisions based on the intervention. That's it from my side.
Thank you very much, Gervin, for presenting teaching at the right level and a very well-documented example. And it also shows the need of data to really make sure that we are working on evidence and showcasing what works in the region. Without further ado, I give the floor to the final presenters for today's webinar, which are Kripa Shankar Upadhyay, CEO of the Delhi Board of School Education, and Priyanka Sharma, Director for Research at the Australian Council for Educational Research in India, which will tell us more about the current effort to support standard-based assessment and the use of learning data in Delhi, and the case study of looking at teachers' perception on the adoption of these standard-based assessments. Thank you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Somaya. I hope my screen is visible and my voice is audible.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much. So good afternoon, everyone. And I think it's afternoon for everyone now on the panel. And I'm Priyanka Sharma, Director Research and Assessment at ACER. And I'm joined by my co-authors, Ananya, Astamurthy, Preeti, and all. Main author, I would rather say that Mr. Kripa Shankar Upadhyay, who is also co-presenter. And I would like to thank Soumya and Ursula for organizing this particular session and giving us an opportunity to learn about different cases and these best practices in different geographies. And I also like to thank my co-authors who have contributed significantly to their study. Now, I would like to hand over to Mr. Upadhyay, Mr. Kripasankar Upadhyay, to set the context for the study, and also he will share the context in which DBSC works. So with that, hand over to you, Upadhyay ji.
Thank you, Priyanka ji, and thank you, Soumya and Ursula, for giving this opportunity for Delhi Board of School Education for this case study. I would like to start why Delhi Board of School Education, because Delhi government is doing a lot of educational reforms in public education system for last 7-8 years. And it is the only government which is spending 1/4 of the budget on education. So apart from the infrastructure and curriculum change, the government has established a new board. Then the question arises that why this new board? Because they are already existing very centralized board in the Delhi. So what the system for the other boards is like that they conduct 3 hours year-end examination, which is based on primarily for rote learning, and that cannot assess the learning of the 2 years of the child if we talked about class 10 and 12th. So rather, I will say that it reinforces learning for assessment. So this board wants to have that assessment for learning. So this is what our line is also, we assess to learn. New education policy in 2020 Government of India has launched this frame, the policy for assessment, that assessment will include before learning and to revise the teaching learning processes to optimize learning and development of the students. It also talks about that the aim of the assessment in the culture of the schooling, we have to shift from one which is summative, which primarily tests, as I've talked, that the rote memorization, to one that is more regular and formative, which is more competency-based, promote learning, and test higher order skills and development of the students. So in the line of the new education policy, Delhi Board of School Education adopted the multifaceted assessment model in which students are assessed in multiple ways and occasion without increasing the workload with the help of the technology. And the performance is reported in the internal assessments and the 2 terms in academic year, term 1 and term 2, which not only that, which also include the multiple mode of assessment, which have the projects, performance, group tasks, presentations, and then reports, exhibition, feedback, review, and many more, quizzes, etc. They are also integrated in teaching learning transactions. Means that we believe that why we are assessing a child. We are assessing that have to have a loop to give the feedback to the teachers and the ecosystem that where we have to change, because every child is unique, and every child, if we provide the good opportunity, every child has the innate potential to access. Also, to avoid the cutthroat competitions of the marks, we means that have the grade the students, we provide the grade student on a 7-point scale to avoid this 95%, 99%, which really filter the students and which fails and pass the students, which we cannot. If every child is given the opportunity, they can excel. We have the evidences of it. And all assessments are linked to the well-defined predetermined standards for each subject. And these standards expressed in terms of criteria. Each subject domain is linked with 4 possible criteria. And each criteria has very fine-grained descriptions of the skill at various levels. And each level performance is reported of every child. This entire process is to learn the feedback to the teachers to improve upon each mode of assessment, which is designed to reinforce learning. Let me give one of the example of this. For example, in one of the criteria, we have the investigation and observation. So what we give the score point for that means the levels we can talk about. For example, that if a child replicate a simple experiment or draw a simple inferences, so we have a band of 2 score points. Similarly, if he or she conducts the experiment having 2 or more variables, and they interpret the data from a moderately complex data set. So we get the
Upadhyayji, are you there?
Yeah.
I think there might be some signal issues. So I'll wait for 1 minute, and if we are not hearing back from him, I will continue.
Thank you.
Wait for just 1 minute.
In the meantime, just a reminder for the participants that you can write down your questions to the presenters in the Q&A tab, which you see in the bottom of your screen, and we'll pick this up after the two presentations. You can also write questions for the presenters of the first sessions.
Yeah. I will continue, Somaya. In between, if he joins, he can take it from there. Fine.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. So hi everyone. So sorry for this disturbance in between. Might be due to signal issues. So he was trying to explain the process, and he had already explained that standards, they determine criterion, and criterions are like they are written in form of fine-grained description of skills. And then the next was I think next was about guiding principles of DBSC that he has already shared before he was going through this details of the assessment process. That guiding principles are to track a student's progress through multiple modes of assessment and having equitable assessments for all. So this he had already covered. So with that, I will move to next. Yeah. So if you see that here on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see a sample of grade descriptions that how these criteria. Upadhyayji, over to you. You are back. So we would like to hear from you.
I'm sorry, it was due to some technical
Please,
glitch.
please
Yeah.
So
This was as I was talking about the different skills of subject of the choice of the students. And not only that, I was talking that design has been introduced first time in class 9, and the fashion, coding, augmented reality, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, finance and accounting, electromechanical production, system and society, world of work, means that, so these are which are needed for the society, apart from those, the structured that, humanities and that science and mathematics. So and not only that, this board is integrating the best academia as well as the industry in the classroom. For example, Indian Institute of Technology, we are for coding, robotics, and the design. And not only that, the best export house of the robotics that we are coming to our schools, and they are taking, and the specialized resource persons from the academia and the industry are coming together. So not only that, our students are having the community assessment also. We have performing in visual arts students have demonstrated what they have learned in the last 2 years. Similarly, for HE21 high and 21st century, they are having their best first time in the history of the public education system in the in Delhi or in the country. We are having the robotics competitions. So this shows that we are making them what exactly society needs. So this assessment task is linked with the assessment criteria, as I have talked about, and the student response provides the evidence of the competency, what they have achieved and attained by the student. And these student responses are mapped with their achievement levels, which gives the indication to the teachers, to the school system to know about the student learning. What does school can change their learning teaching transactions. Ultimately, for what we are assessing to give the feedback to us, to the teachers, that what the changes we have to have with the actionable feedback so that we can incorporate in the classroom, because I'm in the firm belief it is the assessment which drives the classrooms. So and also they can have the change strategies based on these assessment data. So I will now like to request, we have partnered with the International Baccalaureate and the ACER, Australian Council of Education Research, for this designing the new ACE curriculum and the new ACE assessment. Also, we have invited the lot of the academia and the industry to be partnered with us and to design the curriculum. Now, I would like to request Priyanka ji to have that research problem. What are the perception? Because ultimately teachers are the driving force. So what they think about means these adoption of the standard-based classroom assessment and the use of this learning data to improve their learning teaching transaction. It's over to you.
Thank you so much, Upadhyay, for setting the context and setting the flow. So, as shared by co-presenter, it was the first year in DBSC, and when there was a huge shift, we can say that it was a huge shift when DBSC shifted from a content-driven, textbook-driven, and marks-driven assessment to a culture of standard-based and criterion-driven assessment. And so it was very crucial to know how has been the experience of users in this first year, because all of us know there are various research frameworks which say that in very first year, in very beginning, your experience drives your perception. And during perception, if you see that there is some value and benefit in any technology or product or services, then we are more liable to use it further, and we are able to put in more efforts, and which in turn is more likely to result into high impact. So with that, our research question was that what are the perceptions of teachers on the adoption of standards-based classroom assessments and use of learning data. Our methodology was purely qualitative in nature, and which was conducted using semi-structured interviews with 11 teachers and teacher trainers. Basically, they are mentor teachers who are teaching grades 6 to 10. So our researchers had interviewed them using, as I said, that semi-structured method. That was not a very fixed questionnaire kind of interview. Rather, there were few guided questions, and researchers took an approach to be flexible depending upon response of trainers and the teachers, or we can say that interview. The data was transcribed by the researchers, and then all researchers, they brainstormed together to derive meaningful insights from those transcribed information. The major limitation of our study was that less timeline, considering the stakes and rigor of the qualitative analysis. So this study, as in way forward, I will again try to build a case that it will continue further. But what we are presenting here at this point of time, so it is based on a very small study. That is our biggest limitation of this study, basically, I would like to say. So with that, I will come to key findings. I will be presenting findings under three major heads. So this is the first head. So teachers' perception of adoption of standards-based assessment. So participants believe that a student's ability to reflect on where they are in their journey of learning improves by a standards-based assessment. And basically, all of us know that a standards-based assessment allows students to have a very clear picture about that they are being assessed for which criteria and which task is linked to that criteria. And again, this linkage between task and criteria gives them a holistic image on where they are on their learning journey, what they are supposed to do next, and what they can do in order to improve along those criteria in order to achieve that standards. So when this journey is visible to them, they become a better reflector, and rather it improves their self-regulation. This in turn leads to reduction in, or I will say that reduced stress and anxiety towards the students. And this has been shared by students and teachers at various forums. And I think Upadhyayji will agree with me that whenever we had a focus group discussion and meeting with teachers, teacher mentor, head teachers, they shared that students feel less burdened, less stress as compared to previous system. So this and that belief was expressed by participants during interview as well. Participants also expressed that these assessment, standard-based classroom assessments, provide meaningful, actionable feedback for teachers, which can be used in the classroom to design learning strategies for students. They also shared that these standards help them guide task development. And at one point of time, they also shared that they are able to design tasks for individual students or maybe for a group of students. So up to an extent, they are able to personalize learning experience and instruction for a certain group of students. And I think this is mixed to next one, that it helps them set the goals for their teaching learning strategy in the classroom. So second group of findings, that is for their perceived readiness, knowledge, and skills. Because as I said earlier, it was a huge shift where assessments were driven by textbook, totally textbook driven assessments. So at one point, our target was to know that how has been their experience, what worked for them, what is their perception. At the same time, our intent was also to know whether they are ready enough to take this initiative forward. So we tried to gauge their perception of their readiness and knowledge and skills about standard-based assessments. And I am happy to share that they reported that they had received some training on a standard-based assessment by Delhi Board of School Education and of course through ACER as well. But at the same time, they expressed need for further training and support. And all of us will agree that this is not a minor shift. This is a big change. So they need further training and support here. Few of them shared that they have access to learning resources, but they need more resources. And of course, DBSE is working towards that. At the same time, teachers were a bit worried about that they are not able to engage with parents and community. And in this journey of change, they need support of DBSE and ACER in establishing a proper communication about this approach to parents and community, because parents are used to of seeing some marks, 60%, 70%, 80%, up to 99%. They are used to of seeing some rank that their child, their ward is getting first in classroom, but that is not happening in a standard-based classroom assessment. So it requires community connect as well. Their teachers need support from DBSE and ACER. But at the same time, the report was very positive that they are getting support from their head teachers. But at the same time, head teachers also require capacity building exercise. So this is implication for DBSE and ACER. Our third group of finding is that all of us know that assessment itself, simply conducting assessment and examinations in itself, it doesn't lead to any change in learning. Rather, what happens that assessments provide very strong, meaningful data, and using those data points to improve learning, that leads to change in learning. So that was our intent, that whether teachers are able to use this information or not. And we were very happy to see that they reported that they were able to change their teaching strategies based on assessment data. And I would like you to take just a few seconds to read this testimonial given by the teacher. So as envisaged by a standards-based assessment, you can see that teachers are able to find out where students are in their journey of learning, and so that they can help them move to the next level. To sum up, teachers are aware of the benefits of a standards-based assessment. So they see a value in a standard-based assessment, particularly in two areas, in a student self-regulation and designing their classroom teaching learning practices. They also reported that they are receiving some sort of training and support. However, there is the high perceived need for additional professional development support, BSc and ACER. So, as I said in the beginning, this is first year and we had done a very small scale qualitative study, but we have got beautiful insights. So the way forward for the study is to validate these findings, these teacher narratives through classroom observation, and also to review assessment materials and classroom practices to analyze the degree of adoption and to see that what has been fidelity of implementation in classroom. And ultimately, all these initiatives are meant to improve learning of students. So our next step will be to establish relationship between implementation fidelity and change in learning of students. So is there any relation that if implementation of SBA in classroom is high, whether it is leading to high learning gains or not? So that is the point where we want to achieve before a DBSC scales up to 1,000+ schools of Delhi. So with that, I think that's all from our side. With that, if time permits, I would like to invite co-authors to add if I have missed something. Ananya Upadhyay, if you want to add anything, please go ahead.
Yeah,
this floor is for Somaya.
Yeah. Priyanka, very nicely you have described it. I tell you one of the incident when I visited a school where the class 10 mathematics paper was going to be conducted after 2 days, and students, it was a humanities school, so they were busy in conducting the moot court. I asked them, the children, why are you not worried about your mathematics? Well, no, sir. What exactly means that we have studied all of the means this term, it's not going to affect because it is not based on rote memorization. They whatever they learn, the questions will be asked on the experiential based standard rubric. So that's why they were not very much worried about it. So I tell you that the students were so easy and they were busy in that the moot court means that exhibition and other things. So this is what I want to support, that evidence, which I personally went to see that. So students are enjoying. There's definitely have rightly said that we are. Is that the teachers, enabling the teachers to make themselves sufficient is the task. One more thing I would like to here submit, that all of my teachers of 38 schools, they are co-creating the content, which is the students, whatever they're learning from the student, they are co-creating it. And it is a merging curriculum. It's not that once we have finalized the content and curriculum, every year we are going to this exercise with the help of the teachers so that they take the ownership. Similarly, for designing the standard-based assessment, we have involved the teachers, so they have the ownership. So definitely more work has to be done, but it's really a very good start in the field of public or the government education system for driving from that year-end assessment to that standard-based assessment.
Thank you very much to both of you for this very insightful presentation. And I see that you already started answering some of the questions that some of the participants had about motivation of the students on assessments. And it's good to see a real example of how more clarity about the standards with expectation helps also the students alleviate some of the stress of the assessments. And also the point that you're making, I want to stress that out about teachers' professional judgment and teachers' ownership of the assessment process is a very important one. So now we're reaching the final Q&A section of this webinar. I would like to invite all the panelists to join if they wish to answer any of the questions. So maybe since
sorry, Soumya,
yes, go ahead. Yes, please. Sorry.
As Priyanka has talked about the parents' orientation, so it was really a big shift from marks-based to that criteria and grade-based assessment. So we conducted many orientation programs for the teachers, how to report, means how to read the report card, because there were no marks. So that's why a big shift, and we have to have them make aware of it and what are the uses of it. Also, she said about the community assessment. We are, for each domain or specialization of the school, we are conducting the community exhibitions. So they are coming, the parents and the committee, all means the field of people, right, academia, industry. So that come and see that what exactly the student have learned. So we are engaging the all means that walks of the life, the people are coming to join us. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And yeah, and engaging the parents and the community is also very important when the change, as you mentioned, such an important one. I would like to see if any of the other panelists want to add anything to the question around motivation of students. I see that Greta answered it in the chat, but maybe Mark, would you like to add something to that?
Look, I'm happy to. Look, we have a number of experiences as educators with this, but also like to have people realise too that some students aren't ready for assessment too. We have other ways of dealing with assessment, and I'll make reference to students of special needs, disabilities, students who teachers may not be aware of either hearing or sight or sensitivity or sensories. And I think this is really important to be able to understand that. And I know it's a big job to be able to ascertain students all of these things where we may not be aware of them. I think that's an important part of knowing what we can do to actually support students and where they are. The other one too, and I think this comes from what Shirzad had mentioned about adaptive testing, it's what testing are you providing the student? Because as mentioned before, we're trying to ascertain what the student does know and what the next point of teaching and learning is. And to be able to do that, if we're giving a student a test that is far too difficult, then we're going to simply get not enough information. And likewise, if we're giving a student a test that is too easy. So in those two areas, we can actually put students off. And the last one I'd like to add is tell the students why we're testing them. And I think that's really important. Just be upfront, say we're testing you to find out how we can best support you. And this is the best way of actually helping teachers understanding, where your next point of learning should be. And I think that's that transparency with our students and certainly with our parent community, as you've both talked about this paradigm shift. We're not just talking about numbers, we're now talking about skills, knowledge and understandings. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So basically, when we are trying to say that it is a shift, so we had a curriculum standards, and that curriculum standards are usually written in terms of very content standards. They don't give students and teachers insight into what exactly is expected from learners. So that itself is a huge shift we are trying to drive, and this is just year one. So journey is quite long.
And really, Mark, you have very well said about the 2 points. We also have every government school have the specialized teachers for the children with special needs. So they are helping them. Secondly, I tell you, we exactly for what they are being assessed. So we also have the readiness assessments. So in the replica of that, what are they going to be the assessed? So my children have those exposure of that, what kind of the standardized that criteria-based assessment are going to have. So similarly, also we change the criteria means as per the student performance also. So that we have integrated in it. So definitely your 2 very valuable points we'll take care of.
Thank you. Munira Muhammad, would you want to add anything to answer this question about motivation?
Actually, yes, I would like to just point out that when we talk about the motivation of the students, either towards assessment or towards teaching and learning, it's all about making connections. So if the students know whatever they are learning is beneficial in the life that they go back to, that's where the interest and motivation comes in. If it's just the recall of the knowledge that you are testing or assessing, but not its real applicability to the world or the real world they're going back to after the school hours, then the motivation gets hindered or lessened by time. So in order to motivate the students to link or get interested in teaching, learning and assessment itself has to have that connection built up, that whatever you are teaching, whatever you are learning in the classroom is something that you can very well apply in every day-to-day life as well. It's not something that's beyond the horizon and just in the books only. So that's where the motivation actually comes by for each purpose. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for highlighting that point about the nature of the task as well. Would you like to add anything on this point before we take on the next question?
Yeah, please, because Monira has rightly said, and not a single course is not like that, which is not applicable to the society, because we have those industry and academia in partnership, as well as my teacher, they're sitting, what exactly is going to the society. I tell you that we are conducting in 6th and 7th July this community assessment for my HE21. Then each school is presenting the solution of their learning to the society. And what they're learning to the industry, to the society. So this is what main focus is exactly, and as she said, that we are here for applying the learning, whatever we also call them applied schools, also applied learning schools also.
Thank you. And I would like to address, there was a previous question, I'd like to address it to Gervin. There was a question about formative assessment in large class sizes. As we know, Pratham works many in rural and India. And I was wondering if you have any insights about maybe strategies of large classrooms on how you could use formative assessments and differentiated teaching and learning, which often connects to that in a context of large class size. How can we support teachers in that? Gervin, if you're still with us? Maybe not. Any other panelists would like to take on this question? I think Mark, definitely. Okay, you would like, please go ahead.
Soumya, in fact, in Delhi, for last 5-6 years, the government has made 20,000 classrooms. So to reduce this classroom size, definitely. And in these schools, we are having 35 30 to 35 students. In schools of specialized excellence, we have just 30 students. So definitely the Delhi government is doing a lot of work of increasing the infrastructure to reducing this large classroom, definitely. So this is what, and for the formative assessment, we are including that, that adaptive, as talked about, the technology enabled, the government is providing a lot of Chromebooks and that interactive boards and other things to have this. Otherwise, within a year or two, we have just 40 students in our classroom. So that's not the problem in Delhi now.
Sumaya, I would like to add it to it that this is, I think Upadhyayji has said in context that infrastructural challenges that had been taken care, but where still that issue is there. So how people are doing that it's not possible to cater to, when we talk about formative or differentiated, somehow we have a notion that each and every child in the class might need a different approach. But in practice, it doesn't happen. There are some clusters of students who needs a similar strategy. So in few of the best practices, in my experience, teachers are doing that. And like they try to identify that these are 4 or 5 clusters. So they give them 4 or 5 type of things. Few, unlike those who are 2 or 3 grades ahead, they are given challenging tasks. Few, they are still learning. They are given some task like doing and in some activity-based thing which is basically at lower level, catering to their learning style, much like doing some exercise. So teachers have evolved their strategy, and at the same time, they divide their class, and that division is not strict, some into group, but informal groups, and that is up to that is basically teachers' expertise, and that's why we call it formative. That can't be fixed and rigid recommendation that do it this way or that way.
Thank you very much, Priyanka. And yes, the idea is, of course, the grouping, and the grouping changes also depending on the school context and the needs of the students, as you rightly pointed out. There is a question that was asked in the chat. We'll read it to the panelists. It is from that says, I'm working with blind people here in the Solomon Islands. Our target for this year are inclusive education, especially to mainstream blind children in normal education. What is the first step to structure out our planning to target the normal school for preparedness for the blind, to mainstream blind children into normal schools? Maybe I can actually ask for this, Greta, if she's with us, or any other colleague from ACER, because I know that you have just launched very recently a toolkit on inclusive education. So maybe there could be some learning as well that could help the Solomon Islands as they mainstream.
Yeah, that's a huge question, and I think a part of it is to obviously knowing a bit more about, the different types of students, because, it depends how they're coming to you. So, for example, if they're coming to you, they've had like less schooling. If this is a student who's like in their first years of schooling, I guess knowing how people have communicated with them up until this point is useful. And then, like, obviously, teaching strategies that use Braille or a language that, or a lot of tactile clues. So, for example, if you're moving into a particular area of learning like science, you hand them something that is related to that subject area, and you basically explain the link between the object and the area of learning you're about to address. You would have a whole bunch of physical props and cues that allow them to participate. For example, in things I've seen schools where they have used things like balls and things with bells or sounds inside them to allow students with visual impairments to be able to participate in soccer, for instance. So they can hear the ball coming and they know how they can participate. But in terms of sort of reading and writing, being able to type is a skill that can really help students with expressive language who have a visual impairment, but also being able to use Braille of some kind or teaching Braille. So those are obviously pretty specific adjustments for that student. But, if they're participating in conversation, in lots of lively, engaging activities where they can where there's a tactile element and they can relate what they can feel with their hands to what they can hear and the language that they're hearing, then they have opportunities to learn in their own way. I'm not sure that any of that will be super helpful, but I guess I'm just sort of thinking about, it's hard to know without knowing a lot more about your context. But and I guess the other thing quite often would be required is a lot of mobility aids and a lot of consideration of the environment for keeping them safe from sort of, navigating their way around the school and giving them sort of, sometimes I've seen people have like a concrete map of the environment that's like a small version, so they can feel the direction that they might need to take to navigate to different parts of their environment. So probably more to say, but yeah, very specific to the student.
Thank you, Greta, for this very concrete examples. And I think also part of the solution is also thinking about designing strategies to support the schools through this transition, if this is something that is very new for the schools, not only to mainstream blind, but also to be more inclusive in general. Having a comprehensive approach would be helpful. We're reaching the end of our webinar. I would like to again sincerely thank all the presenters and the authors of the case studies. on behalf of both the GEM Center, UNESCO Bangkok, but also NEQMAP in general. This was very insightful, and I hope it was useful to all the participants. Just to give you a bit of information, so as Ursula mentioned at the start, these case studies are part of a series that we publish every year. My colleagues are putting in the chat right now some of the previous editions of the case studies. And this year's case studies will be published in the fall. And you'll get to learn more in detail about the different approaches that were presented today. So please keep in touch, and we will make sure to update you on the launch once the report is ready. Thank you all for being with us, and have a lovely end of your day. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.